Hello everybody, welcome back to the Elthos RPG Mythos Machine Open Beta tutorial on the philosophy and mechanics of the Elthos RPG Armor System. So I'm just going to jump right in. This is Bob. Bob's a fighter. And Bob has no armor. And he rolled a Dexterity of 5, which in the ODS or one die system is pretty good. 6 being the max and 1 being the minimum. And so he has a Dexterity bonus of +1, and he has an armor class which starts for all characters at 1, but because of his Dexterity bonus, his armor class is 2. Obviously, he's not going to be absorbing any damage with his armor, so it's 0. And his movement modifier is 0 because he's not wearing any armor. And so his total movement is 6 because he's human. And movement is accounted in units of 5 feet or 6 feet, depending on what kind of map. And so 6 units is, let's say on wilderness maps, 36 feet. So he can move 36 feet in 1 melee at a sprint. And finally, his attack level. He's a 3rd level character, and he has a +1 because of his dexterity bonus, so he has an attack level 4. And we'll say that he is wielding a normal standard sword, which doesn't give him any pluses or minuses on attack level. So there's Bob. And I think we can say that Bob going into battle with an opponent just like himself is probably going to sustain some damage and think to himself, gosh, why don't I have any armor? And as soon as he can, he's going to go over to the armorer and he's going to buy himself some armor. So let's take a look. But before we do, I just want to cover some key terms. So ACM, which you'll see on the following diagrams, is the armor class modifier for the armor. DXM is the dexterity modifier of the armor. And DAB is the damage absorption of the armor. So armors can affect both how easy it is to hit the character, as well as how much damage is absorbed by the armor per blow. So there's Bob. He's at the armory, and he buys himself leather and shield. And let's take a look at each of these pieces of armor. The shield has a armor class modifier of +1, a dexterity modifier of -1 because it's bulky, and he has to lug it around, and it gets in the way. So it's affecting his dexterity. The damage absorption of the shield is 1, and it is, because of its bulk, reducing his movement by 1. Now let's take a look at the leather vest that he's wearing. It has a armor class modifier +1, giving him a little bit less chance of being actually physically hit because the weapon may glance off of it. And because it's lightweight and close to the body and doesn't really get in the way, it's not affecting his dexterity. And because it's leather and not nothing, it's absorbing some damage per blow, 1 point, and it's not affecting his movement because it is lightweight and close to his body. So what does this do for Bob? Let's take a look. Well, because of the dexterity modifier of the shield, his dexterity is actually reduced by 1 point from a 5 to a 4, which reduces his dexterity bonus from a 1 to 0. and it gives him a total armor class of 1 plus the 2 pieces of armor, so that is the ACMs. So it gives him 3. And then that last minus 0 is we subtract or add as it is, or as it would be, the dexterity modifier, or the dexterity bonus in other words, which is 0 in this case. So his total armor class is a 3. The damage absorption is 2, 1 for the shield and 1 for the leather armor. And his movement modifier is -1 due to the bulkiness of the shield. And finally, his modified attack level is now a total of 3 because he lost the +1 bonus that was coming in from his dexterity. So he puts on the leather vest and the shield and he tries those out, and he thinks, yeah, okay, so I'm a little bit slower, and my attack isn't as efficient as it would be without these 2 pieces of armor, but this armor is absorbing 2 points of damage per blow. And if I'm going into battle, I'm thinking, yeah, damage absorption is probably a good thing. But Bob decides he wants to take a look at the next set of armor. And so the armor brings out Chainmail and the shield. The shield remains exactly the same, so let's look at the Chainmail. So Chainmail is an armor class of +2 with a dexterity modifier of -2, a damage absorption of 2, and a movement modifier of -1. So what this does for Bob is it's bulkier than the leather, and so it modifies his dexterity down to a 2 because the DXM total is -3, -2 for the chainmail, which is really kind of heavy, and -1 for the shield. So his dexterity has dropped from a 5 to a 2, and that means that now he has, instead of a +1 dexterity bonus, he's got actually a -1. And what does this do for his armor class? Well, he starts with the 1 like everybody, and then he adds the 2 ACMs, so it comes to a total of 3, but then he has a deficit on his dexterity, which is -1, so his total is 3. And we'll notice that he has the same exact armor class with both sets of armor, but the difference is that the chainmail absorbs another point of damage. So most weapons in my system are doing 1d6 and either +1 or -1 depending on whether or not they're heavy or light. So damage absorption of 3 is actually really significant because that is the equivalent of saying that the armor absorbs 50% of the damage of the standard weapon, and that's pretty hefty. So that's a big advantage. However, the advantage comes at a disadvantage, which is that the movement modifier reduces his movement by 2, 1 for the chainmail and 1 for the shield. So now he can only run around 4 grids per melee instead of 6. And finally, because his attack level is affected by his dexterity bonus, we'll notice that his attack level actually goes down from a 4 to a 2. So it's a tough call and a difficult decision for Bob whether or not he wants to go with any of these options or which option he wants to pick. Does he want to play it safe and absorb damage, or does he want to be aggressive and hunt to kill with his +1 dexterity bonus, giving him the attack level of 4? Well, Bob's a careful guy, and he says he wants to look at the next set of armor, which is plate mail. Oops, wrong way. There. And there's the plate mail. Plate mail has an ACM of +3 and a Dexterity Modifier of -3 and a damage absorption of 3 and a movement of -2. So what does this do for Bob? Well, it reduces his dexterity down to 1, the absolute minimum. And so his modified dexterity bonus is actually -2. But what does that do to his armor class? Well, in fact, it keeps it the same in this particular case, because everybody starts with the 1, you add up the ACMs and it comes to 4. 1 for the shield and 3 for the plate mail. But his dexterity bonus is now -2, so he actually has a 3 armor class. However, he's got a damage absorption of 4. And yeah, that's a hefty amount of damage absorption. But he's got a movement modifier of 3, so he's moving at half speed in his plate mail. And he has a modified attack level due to the -2 of his dexterity bonus, and so his attack level is actually a 1. So there's Bob, and he's tried on all 3 sets of armor, and he's got to make a tough choice as to how he wants to play this out. I think that's part of the fun of this process and this armor system, is that it causes the player to have to scratch their head and think, how do they want to play it? Now, of course, if the character has a ton of money and maybe they're a knight and they can afford to have a page come around with them, they can actually have different sets of armor and pick and choose according to the situation. For example, if Bob is going to wade into battle with a whole bunch of very low-level creatures, and he has an objective to get over to some objective, let's say cross the bridge to rescue the princess, and he doesn't really care whether or not he kills a bunch of these inferior kobolds along the way, he just wants to make sure he's not getting hit, then plate mail would certainly be a good choice in that case. So you can see that the armor selection is going to depend on what kind of battles are likely to be fought. And so the players need to make that decision for themselves as to what exactly they want in terms of their character's configuration. They may go back and forth and spend some time thinking about it, which is cool, and that's one of the things I actually like about the system. So another thing that I want to mention is that these armors are not set in stone at all, because in the Mythos machine and in the Elthos RPG, you can configure the armors to be any way you want. So if you say, hey, wow, that damage absorption at 3 really doesn't make sense to me for plate mail, well, as a games master, you can go into the Mythos machine and just change your plate mail setting so that it has a damage absorption, let's say, of 4. So there's a lot of variability in this. One of the things that I like about this system that splits out armor class from damage absorption is that it gives a wide variety of possible armors that can be created that have different effects. For example, I have a Kung Fu Mantis Reflexes, and it affects the ACM but doesn't do any damage absorption. It just makes the person super fast at dodging blows and gives, let's say, a +2 ACM but no damage absorption. On the other hand, I have a different Kung Fu armor that's called Iron Shirt, and it does exactly the opposite. It gives damage absorption, but doesn't affect the ability of people to hit. So somebody comes up with a club and hits a guy with Iron Shirt, and he does his chi magnificence, and the club breaks on his arm because he's using Iron Shirt. So it's absorbing all the damage and maybe breaking the weapon. So in other words, I like the configurability of the system, and I also think that it goes another step in the direction of what I think is kind of a little bit towards realism, in the sense that I think this is kind of a pretty reasonable model of how armors work. They slow you down if they're bulky, they absorb damage, and they can also cause blows to be deflected and not hit you at all. And once you do the calculations and you have the armor class figured out, which only takes a nanosecond or so, or maybe a few milliseconds in the Mythos machine, which does all the math when you create characters, then or you can always play at the table without it, without the Mythos machine, but the math required is obviously algebra. And so once you get the idea, I don't think it's really all that complicated. I hope it isn't. But maybe people will have a different opinion about that. In any case, that is the idea, and that is basically how armor works in the Elthos RPG. And I look forward to hearing from people what they think of it, and whether or not they think it's a good model or the converse. And I hope you enjoy exploring the Elthos RPG system and the Mythos machine. Okay, thanks a lot, and I'll see you at the next tutorial.